That situation was caused again primarily by the selfish actions of the P5 members.
Leading factor which prevented this war from escalation is not an intervention. I believe the nuclear deterrence factor plays a crucial role. Trump said that it was brokered by me, but India rejected by claiming that it was the result of the bilateral discussions.
If there is a full-scale war, the whole region would suffer from a shortage of the food.
I still believe that a legal foundation, a legal framework is important, and that's thanks to the United Nations Security Council. Well, if we recall the history of the conflict, in the 1960s, United Nations Security Council passed a resolution, important resolution, how the Kashmir issue should be resolved. But unfortunately, in terms of the mediation and in terms of the implementation of those resolutions, not only this resolution, but some others, United Nations lacks practical instruments. And basically it's the caught in the fight between permanent members, P5, but also if we take into account that both countries, India and Pakistan, were non-officially nuclear powers, so there is no real mechanism for enforcement. But I think still, we have witnessed also this situation in our conflict, Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. In 1993, United Nations Security Council passed 4 resolutions, which remained on the paper. But I think, nevertheless, United Nations resolutions, especially Security Council resolution, were important from the legal point of view. They create sort of the legal foundation for international relations. Whether it's working or not working, still we are not in the jungles. There is sort of system exists. And by the way, thanks to that system, in 2020, when Azerbaijan liberated its territory, it's really the action was based on those resolutions, on the article of UN Charter, Article 51, self-defense. So when we come back to the Kashmir problem, I still believe that a legal foundation, a legal framework is important, and that's thanks to the United Nations Security Council. Yes, in terms of the practical implementation, in terms of the mediation, United Nations was not effective, and in the latest outburst of this conflict, in the latest clash between India and Pakistan, it looks like some individual powers, like United States, again, I don't know exactly, but was kind of acting to mediate this conflict rather than the United Nations. That's unfortunate, but this situation, we should not only blame United Nations. I'm not trying to advocate for United Nations, but I think if we look at the situation, the global order or maybe global disorder. That situation was caused again primarily by the selfish actions of the P5 members, because they undermined international law and international order. If one power, let's say, make intervention, illegal intervention, the other members of international, the other global powers, instead of enforcing, instead of, in other cases, solidifying, let's say, international law, they acting kind of tit for tat. Okay, you did that, I'm doing this. You did this, I'm doing that. So that's the situation. I don't think United Nations institutions should be blamed, rather than the countries, especially global powers, should be blamed for such situation.
Kashmir region is definitely a strategically important region for both India and Pakistan, but the strategic advantage is not the main element of this confrontation. It has some historical, cultural, demographic elements there, because what Pakistan says is that majority of the people there are Muslims, and therefore we need to protect their rights. They want to be independent. And India, in contrast, claims that historically Kashmir belonged to us. Historically, Pakistan never existed, it belonged to us. And then in 1947, the head of the princely state of Kashmir and Jammu, Maharaja Singh was his name, he signed an accession, instrument of accession with India, and which officially made Kashmir part of India, according to India's position. And therefore, India claims that that territory should belong to them. With respect to other points of view, Kashmir has quite a big touristic potential. It can definitely be fruitful in terms of contributing to the overall economy. And of course, as it's also located along the mountains, it can have certain strategic importance along military superiority. Along the, there is this line of control which was imposed by United Nations in 1948 with respect to having possessed the heights, the mountains there. It can definitely bring some advantage from the military point of view to both parties. For example, if you look at the 1999 war, the Kargil war, why did this war start? It was over the Kargil mountain. The both parties were willing to take over that strategically important place, which would have given them quite a substantial superiority, on the military front. And therefore, this war started that time. And I believe it has certain, strategic importance from military, point of view. But then the core roots of this conflict are not based on this military strategy aspect. It's mostly based on the cultural, historical, and demographic aspects. Water is a big deal. It's a big problem in the region because we all know that most of the people in northern India and in Pakistan, in Kashmir, they use the water system of Ind River. Therefore, in 1960, the water treaty was signed between India and Pakistan to regulate these issues. And according to this agreement, the three western rivers of Ind River, they would be given to Pakistan. Pakistan would have the full control over those rivers. And then the three eastern branches of Ind River will be given to India. And the treaty was abrogated by India recently, which definitely angered Pakistani side because can you imagine there are some 240 million people living in Pakistan, and now once they are deprived of these waters, it could definitely lead to the humanitarian crisis. That's a big problem for Pakistan, and therefore Pakistan officially stated that this act of India represents casus belli, which means cause for war. And if it continues, Pakistan will have to take some strict measures, harsh measures against India.
The region holds significant weight in agriculture, pharmaceutical, and IT services provider markets, because as we know, both India and Pakistan are largest producers and exporters of rice, and if there is a full-scale war, the whole region would suffer from the shortage of the food. Even the Malaysian officials announced that the war can put the risk over the Malaysian food security. And if there is a war, I mean the full-scale war between two Asian giants, the world would suffer from the food shortage. Even some countries can suffer from famine and starvation.
Well, definitely connectivity and trade is another part of this conflict, as both parties, they are willing to take over the strategically important routes. But the thing is that if you look at the Kashmir itself and the map, we will see that Kashmir is mostly a mountainous place. But the region itself, the South Asia, which covers Pakistan and India, can be regarded as a hub of connectivity, because there are major maritime routes passing from India through Indian Ocean and then to the Red Sea, and then there are routes in Pakistan itself, not just let's say ground routes, but also maritime routes. The potential escalation of war can definitely endanger the security of those routes, both in India and Pakistan. So therefore, connectivity is another aspect which can be endangered with the escalation of this confrontation between India and Pakistan. And we have to take into consideration the fact that Pakistan is home to some important strategic routes, connectivity projects. One of them is Lapis Lazuli, for example. Azerbaijan is also a member of this connectivity project. Once the war is escalated, all those projects would be in danger. And not just India and Pakistan, I believe the entire world would suffer because of that.
This region is also very important for China. China owns the Aksai Chin region, which is also claimed by India as a part of Ladakh region. And Kashmir region also acts as a buffer zone for China between nuclear-powered neighbors like Pakistan and India. China also heavily invested in the region. The China-Pakistan economic corridor lies to the Kashmir region, and within the framework of Chinese flagship initiative, which is called Belt and Road Initiative, China invested in interconnectivity projects like railway networks, pipelines, and seaports. And the corridor which I just mentioned, the China-Pakistan economic corridor, ends in Gwadar port of Pakistan. It's one of the major routes for China to transit the oil from Gulf states through the Indian Ocean to mainland China by using the Gwadar port. Besides Gwadar, there are a few Chinese invested ports like Hambatato in Sri Lanka. There is also Chinese operated port in Myanmar, which is called Kiapyu. All these ports are located next to the escalated area, and the full-scale war can put these ports under risk.
China is definitely part of the conflict. It has its own interests. We all know that in 1962 there was a massive escalation happening between India and China, as a result of which China captured some 10% of Kashmir and Jammu region. And this is a matter which I believe made China and Pakistan join their efforts and cooperate against India, as both parties, both China and India, view each other as the major geopolitical rivals in the region. Therefore, they try to gain certain superiority through economic, military and political leverages. And I believe Kashmir represents one such opportunity and leverage for China to use it against India, to weaken it and to have certain geopolitical advantages across the border. And therefore, China has mainly been supportive of Pakistani position.
During the escalation, we observed the engagement of the air force of two countries, and in accordance to the Pakistan officials, the Pakistan Air Force took out 5 Russian and French-made jet fighters of India. We observed the capability of Chinese jet fighters too, because Pakistan side used Chinese-made J-10C war machines against India. These air fighters were designed with sophisticated laser and missile systems, particularly the Chinese-made PL-15E missile system were very successful in this war. As of today, Chinese aircraft were considered as a weak rather than its Western rivals, such as French Rafale and US-made aircrafts. Even Chinese-made jets are much cheaper than the French Rafale jets, which is manufactured by the French Dassault Aviation Company, cost more than $250 million. But the Chinese J-10C cost around $40 million. And China and Pakistan has been collaborating in the building superior military technology for years. As a result, thanks to this collaboration, Pakistan got advantage against India.
The current official position of the United States with respect to Kashmir dispute is about supporting bilateral negotiations and discussions between Pakistan and India, while also taking into consideration wishes of Kashmiri people. So basically saying what the United States is trying to do is to pursue a balanced approach with respect to both nations, as United States has deep interest in cooperating with Pakistan. Simultaneously, it has developing, burgeoning strategic ties with India as well lately. So therefore, as it doesn't want to break balance, it definitely supports the settlement of this issue through bilateral negotiations, which is also, by the way, official stance of India, as India has always been saying that the basis for the negotiations should be the Simla Agreement, which was concluded in 1972, which says that all kinds of issues and disputes between the parties must be settled via bilateral ties. With respect to the evolution of United States stance on the Kashmir dispute, we have to go back to the onset of the conflict in 1947. At the initial stage of the Cold War period, United States has attempted to pursue somehow more neutral policy with respect to Kashmir conflict by supporting United Nations Security Council resolutions. We all know that UN Security Council has so far adopted 18 resolutions with respect to Kashmir conflict, and the most important of them is the resolution 47, which was adopted in 1948, and which was calling upon the parties to conduct a plebiscite in disputed areas. And we all know that those resolutions so far have not been successful, have not been implemented. Then the position of the United States in 1950s, in mid-60s, it started to change gradually because the United States began to include geopolitical, strategic elements to its foreign policy towards South Asia. That was the time when India was trying to build a non-alliance movement alongside Indonesia, Yugoslavia, and didn't want to see itself on the side of neither Soviet Union nor United States, whereas Pakistan represented a great opportunity for United States in terms of fulfilling its strategy of containment of Soviet Union at that time. And therefore, United States started to include Pakistan to regional projects such as CENTO, which was established in 1955, SEATO, which was established in 1954. So Pakistan were members of both platforms. Those were political, military platforms, by the way. And the goal was to contain Soviet Union. So therefore, the stance of United States dramatically changed in favor of Pakistan. In 1960s and 50s, even though United States tried to mediate somehow in 1961-62 together with United Kingdom, those mediation efforts did not yield productive results. And what we see in the 1970s, that yet another shift in the position of United States after the third war between India and Pakistan in 1971. We know that similar agreement was concluded, and which stated that all issues will be settled through bilateral discussions. And the United States began to support this position because once again there was a strategic element as well, as that was a time when Pakistan began to grow its ties, relationship with China. And therefore it also definitely shaped US position with respect to Kashmir conflict. And then after the Cold War period, we once again see certain shift. The United States began to support more bilateralism, which stated that all problems should be settled, let's say, through bilateral channels between India and Pakistan. And also, most importantly, the ultimate goal of the United States was to try to prevent any kind of escalation between the parties, because already by 1998, both Pakistan and India were nuclear states. And the next escalation, the all-out war between them, could very well lead to the utilization of nuclear forces that would endanger the entire globe. Therefore, one of the strategic elements of US position was to make sure that there is no escalation between the parties and problems are settled through diplomacy. As an example, we can speak about 1999 Kargil war between Pakistan and India. That was a time when Bill Clinton interfered, by the way, and asked the parties to hold, let's say, hostilities and sign a ceasefire, because the United States was concerned with respect to the utilization of nuclear, let's say, forces by both parties. But of course, the geopolitical situation in the world started to change, especially after 9/11. When United States launched, let's say, anti-terror measures against Afghanistan, and that was a time when the United States needed assistance from Pakistan to deal with terrorism, to combat terrorism, and hence we could observe a certain level of amelioration, rapprochement in the relationship between United States and Pakistan for a while. But at the same time, the US did not want to cut its, let's say, ties with India, did not want to diminish its relationship with India. In contrast, the United States started to view India as a key strategic partner, especially in its South Pacific, in its policy direction in South Pacific region, and especially aimed at containing China, the major rival. So, taking into consideration China started to be viewed as the major rival of the United States, it could have been wiser for official Washington to ally itself with India against possible hegemonic ambitions of China. And therefore, the balanced position of United States towards the issue persisted even after 9/11. But during the Trump's first term, the certain, let's say, developments took place. For example, in 2019, we know that India made a decision to revoke, to abrogate Article 370 of Constitution, which revoked the special status of Jammu and Kashmir. And these actions of India, together with, let's say, some harsh restrictions imposed by Indian authorities on people in Kashmir Valley, made United States act swiftly and denounce India's actions. And it was stated by on the declarations of U.S. State Department, by the press secretariat of White House, and so on. United States openly blamed and accused India for imposing harsh restrictions in that region. Then, once again, we witnessed burgeoning strategic ties between the United States and India. United States has become one of the leading partners of India in trade, including in trade of arms, by the way. So therefore, United States still tries to pursue this balanced policy, but somehow we can see this shift, tilt towards India, which means maybe United States somehow broke this balance favoring India lately. But the recent developments, especially the recent outbreak of the escalation in April 2025, and the result of these developments, when the United States declared that it prompted both sides to sign ceasefire, once again indicate that there are certain problems between India and the United States as well, as Trump said that it was brokered by me, but India rejected by claiming that it was the result of the bilateral discussions, not the intervention by the United States. Late is for me quite a relative term. Because the mediation is quite a complex process, and first of all, you need to identify the source of the problem. You need to learn about the problem, about the dispute, through various diplomatic and intelligence channels, and then try to reach out to the parties to the conflict and try to reconcile them. So it usually takes certain time. I believe 2-3 weeks passed since the escalation when Trump declared the ceasefire. But nevertheless, what I believe is that the most important thing is that the intervention happened and ceasefire was agreed. To judge whether it was late or it was early, it would be quite a difficult, challenging task for me, because if you look at the previous cases in 1999, for example, in that time Bill Clinton interfered 4 or 6 weeks after the escalation. That was indeed quite weak. I mean, hundreds of people died before that. In this case, unfortunately, there are some who died as well. Maybe United States could have interfered much earlier, yeah. But most important thing is that the intervention happened and ceasefire was declared. But for me personally, the leading factor which prevented this war from escalation is not an intervention. I believe the nuclear deterrence factor plays a crucial role here, because once you have a nuclear weapon, then it will definitely deter other states to implement some offensive against you. And that's why it's sometimes labeled as MAD doctrine, which means mutually assured destruction. Which means if both parties possess nuclear weapons, the possible confrontation will eventually lead to the destruction of both parties. And therefore, the nuclear deterrence is a major factor. And then, of course, the mediation and interference by other parties can mitigate the situation and make the parties sit down and discuss their problems through bilateral channels.
As far as Azerbaijan is concerned, or as Azerbaijani position is concerned, we always stand for the principle of international law and the importance of United Nations Security Council resolutions. That applies not only to the Kashmir issue but some other issues, including ours, but the Middle East, Ukraine, etc. So We are standing for definitely peaceful resolution of this issue, for deconflicting. But in the meantime, in terms of the principle, let's say the long-term resolution, both countries should really make efforts to find some common ground. But again, I would like to underline here that the Kashmir issue has its own legal framework rooted in relevant resolutions of the United Nations Security Council. Whether they adopted in 60s or 50s, I mean, UN resolutions doesn't have the kind of expiration term. So even after 50, 60 years, either new resolution should be adopted, maybe it's time for kind of reconsidering certain aspects, but provided that there are still those in 60s exist, I think this is the legal foundation.
Well, of course, Azerbaijan and Pakistan so far have been very reliable allies, and we have supported each other in various platforms. Pakistan has always been supportive of Azerbaijani just stance on the conflict with Armenia. It has always supported our territorial integrity, sovereignty, and vice versa. We have always conveyed our support for Pakistani nations. Times when they had certain problems, when they had environmental problems in their country, we sent humanitarian relief to Pakistan. And similarly now, after this conflict escalated, our Minister of Foreign Affairs officially stated, denounced attacks by India to Pakistan, which is another indication of our support to this state. With respect to the counter responses of India, well, I believe India has already carried out some destructive policies with respect to the South Caucasus region by assisting Armenia, by sending military technologies. We all know that what has evolved recently after the escalation when Azerbaijan openly denounced actions of India. But I don't see it will be beneficial for the cooperation between two countries, because Azerbaijan has been actively cooperating with India as well so far. And last year, if I'm not mistaken, more than approximately 200,000 Indian tourists came to Azerbaijan, and they mostly enjoyed their time here. If there is such demand to come to see Azerbaijan, then why should they put certain restrictions or hinders to that? So I don't believe this call will yield results for them, but the militarization of Armenia, thanks to India, will continue.
Well, speaking frankly, I don't see the resolution of the Kashmir issue in the near future. I think the trend, unfortunately, is going in opposite direction. With all this narrative of nationalism, especially Hindu nationalism, I don't think the Kashmir problem will be resolved in the near future. But neither I believe that these countries will clash in the near future and will go to war, because the nuclear weapons sort of is a containment mechanism for both countries, because both realize that if it will go into full war and the use of nuclear powers will just annihilate not only these two countries but the whole region and countries around. So that may be not a good mechanism. I'm speaking about nuclear weapons as a containment, because other countries around looks at nuclear weapons as a sort of the insurance mechanism. And that undermines non-proliferation regime. But again, that should not be blamed to individual countries, rather to global powers who use various intervention mechanisms to undermine territorial integrity and sovereignty.